Hi there, my name is Stacy Connell, and I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about domestic violence today. A little bit of a backstory about why this topic is important to me. Um, I had a sibling who actually, he and his wife were violent to each other, actually. It wasn't one picking on the other, they were both involved in domestic violence, and I saw how that impacted their lives and their relationship and their daughter's life. And also, I have since I've become a foster parent, I have had children in my care who have um, been witness to domestic violence, and that's actually part of the reason that some of them were removed. And I just have been very intrigued to see how domestic violence can affect people's lives and their relationships and that kind of stuff. So I really hope you learn something new today. So, just a little bit of facts and numbers about domestic violence. Nearly 1 in 5 women suffer from or have experienced physical violence from an intimate partner, and about 1 in 7 men. So, honestly, the men's side of it was a little more surprising to me because you hear often about women who are being um, abused or mistreated by their partners, but you don't often hear about the men. So, for the numbers to be that close was very surprising to me. It is most commonly in women ages 18 to 24, so a younger and more vulnerable age group. Um, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. So that equates to about 10 million people, men and women, each year, just in the United States alone. That's just crazy to me. And then 1 in 10 women have even been raped by an intimate partner. Um, so it's just something that's a lot more common than most of us even realize. Um, so a little bit of the backstory of domestic violence. Way back, 100 years ago, it was actually legal, and they had what was called the rule of thumb law. That meant that a husband could beat a wife with anything that was the size of his thumb or smaller. That was just considered correcting his wife or teaching her with the way she should act. And so, all the way up until 1920, it was legal to hit your spouse in the United States. So, we think of that being something that only happened way back in the past, but it really wasn't that long ago. And it wasn't until the 1970s when a huge movement had actually started where people started to really make it um, a common law where women were able to get protection orders and other things were put in place, homes and ways for women to get out of domestic violence situations. That wasn't until the 1970s when feminism and women's rights started to really become popular. So, the dimensions of wellness, ways that this affects people. Domestic violence affects everybody a little bit differently because we're all unique and things impact us differently. When you think about the obvious of physical, um, it's easy to see how that is impacted. Obviously, it's not good for your body to be hit or pushed or burned or whatever it is. But then that also takes a toll on the emotional side. If you're abused, you live in a state of feeling unworthy oftentimes, um, and it impacts your spiritual life. It can either make you one of two ways, either um, relying solely on God, or the exact opposite where you blame God. So it really can take an impact on either side of the spiritual wellness, social, and emotional wellness, your social. Oftentimes, abused women are isolated, even abused men are isolated from those around them. So it really impacts that social, that relational part of our lives that is so important. Um, and it's just each person is going to be affected a little bit differently, but it pretty much can hit every one of the dimensions of wellness. So, what does God say? What does the Bible say about domestic violence? I think Ephesians 5:22-35 really gives us a good example about husbands and wives and how they should treat each other. But it kind of even goes bigger than that. It talks about wives, you should submit yourselves to your husband, your own husbands, as you do to the Lord. For your husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now the church submits to Christ, so wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleanse her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. For we are the members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one in flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So I think that just talks about the beautiful relationship between man and woman and how we're supposed to equally love and respect each other, and God knew who needed what and how it needed to work perfectly. And domestic violence does not fit into that. It doesn't talk about husbands beat your wife until she submits. It talks about equally respecting and loving each other enough to do the things that we need to support and love each other. Um, so, just to kind of sum it up, um, domestic violence affects a lot of people, and it's obviously very wrong, but it affects everybody differently. And so, yeah, that's just a lot of the stuff that I had learned and I found interesting. So, I hope you learned something new today. Thanks for listening.